Landlords are scum. Landlords exploit tenants, they charge ridiculous high rents, they don't look after properties. This is why landlords are generally hated by the UK public. Or maybe not. This is the impression we're given in the press, on social media, and certainly what some of the tenants' rights groups say, campaigning against all these bad landlords. Now, I would agree, there are definitely bad landlords out there. There are people who don't look after their property. They don't maintain them. There are people living in terrible conditions. They have damp in the property. They have heating that doesn't really work. They have poor ventilation in their properties. But did you know these are not just private landlords? Very often these are the complaints that come from council-owned properties as well. And actually, there are just as many bad council properties as there are private landlord properties. Now, whilst there are these bad landlords and people who put too many people into a property, they've got people hotbedding where some people are working on shifts, someone sleeps in their bed, then they get up and go to work, and someone else who's got an opposite shift comes and sleeps in the same bed. Can you believe this happens in today's society in the UK in 2025? Yes, it does happen. But it doesn't mean that every landlord is like that. In fact, the vast majority of landlords, and there are 2 million private landlords in the UK, they look after their properties and they look after their tenants. Why? Because they understand their tenants are customers of their property business. They want to look after those tenants, provide good quality, affordable accommodation for people who cannot afford to buy properties themselves. If we didn't have private landlords providing accommodation, there really would be an even bigger housing crisis in the UK. Very often landlords are accused of stealing properties that first-time buyers would like to buy and driving up the price. And whilst that might happen occasionally, in reality, that's not actually the case. Let's dig into that a bit deeper, shall we? Because there are two types of properties that landlords typically have. Very often they might have an apartment. They have an apartment, a flat that's rented out to tenants, and tenants love to live in apartments because they don't have gardens to look after. They're nice and often new and shiny. They're really easy and convenient, great locations compared to transport facilities, those kind of things. So tenants like living in apartments, which is often what landlords buy. Landlords also buy bigger properties. They might use as HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, where they're renting out individual rooms. And again, those bigger houses are not really what first-time buyers are going to buy. And also first-time buyers, they might sometimes buy apartments depending where they live, but often first-time buyers, they want to get their foot on the market and buy maybe a 2 or 3 bedroom house. Now, again, landlords do buy 2 and 3 bedroom houses. They do rent those out, but that's not where the majority of landlords are making their money renting out properties. So I don't really buy into this argument that really landlords are taking away properties that first-time buyers would normally buy because it's the different type of property that landlords often rent out. Now, any landlord who's educated, who's done some property training, knows that they are liable, they're responsible for that property. They have certain regulations they need to adhere to, and ultimately, if something happened to their tenants in their property, they could be personally liable for that. So a good landlord wants to look after the property, they want to look after the tenants, they want to make sure they adhere to all of the regulations. And the regulations are increasing. I think regulation is a good thing. I think sometimes governments over-interfere in what should be a free market. And the problem with that is that's happening right now, concerned with the Renters' Rights Bill. A lot of landlords are worried about tenants being given too many rights and not being able to get rid of bad tenants. And that's encouraging many landlords to get out of the property investing market. Now, in any market, we also have people coming in who are new, we also have people exiting and retiring. It's just that right now we have more and more landlords leaving. I think the government needs to be very careful. If they make it too much of a disincentive to be a landlord, we'll see even more landlords selling up, which means less stock on the market, which means actually higher prices for rents. So ironically, very often government intervention that's designed to help and support tenants actually makes things worse because they get rid of some of the good landlords who just aren't prepared to do this anymore. And very often the bad landlords, they don't care about rules and regulations anyway. So I'm all for regulation that provides good quality accommodation, but governments, please don't over-regulate. Please don't drive off the good lads. Don't penalise the good people who are trying to provide affordable accommodation for those people who cannot afford to buy their own home. Really important distinction there. Now, I've personally been investing for 30 years. I became a live-in landlord when I bought my very first property and rented out some of the rooms, and I became a proper HMO landlord in 1998 when I moved out of my first house, retained that and rented it to students at the University of Birmingham. So I've been a landlord for a very long time, and I've been teaching people how to become a successful investor for the last 22 years, since 2003. And always, I've told my students to make sure they look after their properties and they look after their tenants. After all, tenants are customers. They're customers of that property business who are paying you every single month. If you don't look after the property, don't look after tenants, the tenants will decide to go and live elsewhere. And one of the reasons we invest in property is not just to make cash flow right now, but it's the long-term equity growth as the value of property generally goes up over time. Now, property prices do not always go up. It's a cyclical market. They go up and they come down. But the long-term trend in the UK is up because we live on an island with a limited amount of accommodation and an increasing population. In fact, the government say we need 300,000 new homes every year. Their pledge was to build 1.5 million in their term. Of course, governments don't build properties. They create the environment to stimulate developers to build those properties. But there is no way we're going to build 1.5 million homes over the 5-year term of the Labour government. So there is this big shortage of accommodation. And because of that, long-term property prices go up. So as a property investor, investing in property, we need to look after the property and look after the tenants. They go hand in hand because we're actually looking after our future investments. Of course, occasionally we need to do work to properties, and particularly for tenants been living there for a long time. As many of my tenants, I have some tenants who've been living in my properties for 15 years. Think about that. The same tenant for 15 years. Do you think they would live there if it wasn't good quality accommodation at an affordable rate? No, they'd vote with their feet, they'd stand up and go and find somewhere better. Because I look after my properties, I look after my tenants, and I encourage my students to do the same. We have long-term tenants who look after, and some of my tenants, they treat the property like their own home. They actually do work and improvements to the property because as far as they're concerned, they're living there for the rest of their lives, and I'm happy to support them doing that. So yes, there are some bad landlords out there, but there are also equally as many bad tenants. People who move into a property, they have no intention of paying the rent. They use the regulations and law to protect themselves for as long as possible. Then they disappear and go and find the next landlord they can take advantage of. So in any market, there's going to be good people and bad people. But as a property investor and as a landlord, you have the choice. You have the choice of what kind of landlord you can be. And I highly recommend you decide to be a good landlord, looking after your property and also looking after tenants. That's the long-term view. Unfortunately, too many people in this world, they're very short-term. They're trying to make a quick buck, they're trying to make a quick pound here and there, and they don't see the long-term view. If you want to be truly wealthy, you need to understand wealth creation is a long-term strategy. Income is short-term, wealth is long-term. And investing in property is one of the best assets you can use to invest in property. And if someone is watching this as a tenant, thinking, oh, I want to get on the ladder, guess what? There are lots of ways that you can get your foot on the property ladder, become a property owner, and who knows, one day maybe become a landlord yourself. But it starts about, if you're really unhappy being a tenant, why not find a way to actually become a property owner? And there are lots of strategies, lots of videos on this YouTube channel, such as purchase lease options, which are a great way for people to get their foot on the ladder and become a property owner and get out of becoming a tenant. So rather than moaning and complaining about it, want to do something positive and proactive, educate yourself, learn how you can become someone who's actually providing quality accommodation yourself. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like the video, come and comment below. Do you think all landlords are scum? Or do you think maybe that's just a very small minority? Also, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, hit the bell icon, because anytime a new video comes out, you'll get notified when it comes out. And some of my videos are very timely with opportunities in the market that you want to take advantage of. And finally, if you would say, well, I'm not so sure about landlords, are they nice or not? Maybe you need to meet more landlords yourself, other property investors. I'd highly recommend you come and visit one of the local property investor network meetings. We hold them all over the country, about 45 meetings every single month. They're in the evening, so you can do it after work. And the idea is to come and meet other people like you who are also interested in investing in property. I know the idea of going to meet strangers isn't very attractive for most people, but we make it really friendly. And also you'll get to hear from other local people in your area who are successfully investing in property. It's a great way to build your personal network, to get recommendations for things like builders, solicitors, people you need in your property journey, your property power team, and also learn some of the best strategies you can use in the current property market. Now, investment to come along to a PIN meeting is just £25 to come along. However, if you've never been before, I'd like to invite you to come to your very first PIN meeting completely free of charge and come and understand more about how to become a successful investor. So all you need to do is go to our website, which is pinmeeting.co.uk. I'll put a link below this video, pinmeeting.co.uk. Come and find your local meeting, scroll down, make sure you can make the date and time, and then come book your ticket. And where you normally pay, click on where it says use a voucher code. Fill in your details and then use the word YouTube. Use the word YouTube, the details in the description below, and it will bypass the payment page. You can come to your very first PIN meeting for free to see what you've been missing out on and understand there's a whole world out there of how to become a successful property investor, but it starts with you educating yourself. YouTube videos are great. I have lots of videos on my channel. I do hope you enjoy those. But something magic happens when you're physically in a room, when you connect with other people, be inspired by what they've done, and realize you can become an even more successful investor. So whether you're new to property or already got a whole load of properties, you've done it yourself, come along to a PIN meeting and find out what you've been missing out on. Until the next video, I encourage you as ever to invest with knowledge, invest with skill.